What's good, family? Welcome to another episode of the Rainey and Ro Show. My name is Ro Lamb. That is Kayla Rainey.
Hey.
And as I said, you are tuning in to another episode of the Rainey and Ro Show.
Yeah, we are. Podcast for
Yes.
the creatively minded and professionally curious. I got that backwards, but it's the thought
Hey,
that counts.
it all goes together. It all um yes, we're back. We
Yeah, we
missed you
are.
guys. Another week, another episode. Today, Kayla, what are we doing today?
Oh my gosh, today's really special because we're actually going back with one of my oldest collaborators, Danny Gorny. And I can't wait for you guys to hear the story of how this came together.
Yes. So let's put our hands together for the great Danny Gorny.
Hey.
Danny, what's good, bro?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
For sure. So today we're going to talk to Danny just about his career, his work, his life. He has a Kickstarter going right now. We're going to touch on all that today. But before we do that, we want to talk about what is inspiring us from the week. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? And you all know how it goes. Kayla, you go first.
I know. I'm always first. And you know what? I would like to follow up on my last week's What is Inspiring Me because I take it back.
Oh, okay.
I am taking back my last week's What's Inspiring Me.
Is that allowed? Is
yes.
Critical?
She does what she wants. She does what she wants.
That is how Kayla do.
It is how I do, as you both know. So I said last week that I started watching The Midnight Club, and I was really excited about it because it's the same creators of Haunting of Hill House and Midnight Mass, which I loved both of those series so much. I was like, I will watch anything by these guys. I finished the series this past week, and Ro, I texted you, and I was really hoping that you had binged it because I wanted to commiserate with you. And I won't do any spoilers, but all I'm going to say is I take back my inspiration from last week, and I'm very disappointed.
So did you replace it with anything? Is there anything to
So it's spooky season, and in my house we only watch, I mean, I'm already a fan of like horror and horror themed everything, if you can't tell. And so we always watch like exclusively like classic horror stuff through the month of October. And I had never watched American Horror Story, which I know everybody has been telling me for years, like, oh, you would love it, like it's totally your speed, like you're kind of grotesque, like spooky supernatural stuff. And so I'm almost finished with the first season. I'm like this close.
Yeah, I never watched that.
Really?
It's just the commercial was just too much for me. It was too much. Like I like horror.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
You don't have the stomach for it, do you?
It was too much. I can't do it.
Danny and I are over here like, we're sick. Like,
I mean, I'm not as big of a horror nerd as you are. I've only seen one spooky movie this October.
So I think for me, I don't even know if I say I like horror as much as I like psychological, thriller, suspense thing. I'm like some of the body stuff, like I don't know. It was just too much. It was too much for me. It was too much. I couldn't do it.
I like things that give me nightmares. It's like a fun game.
Okay. All right. Well, to each their own.
Rose like, and this is the end of Kayla and I's partnership. We'll be signing out now.
No, hey, we're still here.
All right, I'll take over.
Danny's trying to take my spot. I don't know how I feel about this.
No, it's I've got a new job. I don't got time for that.
He's like, look, Kayla requires a lot of maintenance.
I mean, she's a delight
for me.
A delight, right? So Danny, talk to us. What's been inspiring you?
Sure. So I did just watch a fun, spoopy film 2 weeks ago Studio 666, featuring
Yes.
you know, American rock idols, the Foo Fighters, as largely themselves.
I love it.
And it was surprisingly fun. I had people over at my new apartment for the first time to go see this. We had a really great time, and Dave Grohl was great in it. And a lot of the film is just sort of horror movie, like sort of in the horror canon, a lot of greatest hits. Like, you know, there was a pea soup scene, there was whatever, there was whatever, you know, some stairs that were filmed from a very low angle. There was a song in the key of what was like L sharp. So that was kind of fun, and like sort of reminded me how fun horror can be, which has been really nice. And shortly thereafter, I started brainstorming something with a werewolf for some reason. So that's I'm workshopping that. I've got like 8 pages in. I might make it longer. I'm not sure. And I'm reading this.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Which is real good.
Yes.
It's about like a family of black magicians with some crazy rules and a young kid who wants to kill the past in order to free magic and not have to deal with that social bullshit. So
like something Ro would have written.
It does sound like something I would have written. I actually supported their Kickstarter. They did like a hardcover with like the first 10 or 12 issues in this hardcover. It's a beast. But yeah, I love that series. Love that.
I just picked that up a couple days ago at my local shop. I know it's an oldie. I've only really read the first issue, but it's really good.
It is.
So I'm looking forward to going through it. Certainly is on brand for some of the other stuff I'm doing as well. And I really like that. And the art's quite good. So yeah, definitely it's worth it for the good art, for a fun story, and for an uncommon concept that seems to be well executed.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's great. Anything else you want to throw in there, Danny? You good?
I mean, that's the news. I tend to kill my own past as well.
Word. Well, you're gonna hear plenty from you throughout the night.
I would have to remind me to do that and everything.
So for me, I went to see a play. So my writing partner, we meet on Mondays. She said, "Hey, I went to see this play. It's called Hurricane Season. You should go see it." I said, "Okay." It was like 10 minutes from my house. I went, and it was phenomenal. I mean, it was great. Like I left, and it was like one of those plays where I really didn't know how to feel about it when I left. But I knew that I had just experienced something that was it was different, you know? And so I actually went a second time.
Oh man.
And I took my wife with me, and it was better the second time. I mean, it was great. And I actually had the opportunity to connect with the writer, and the writer ended up sending me the script, and we're going to meet for coffee. And so that inspired me to write my first play. So I wrote my first play this past week and been getting some really good feedback on it. But I don't know, I've just been really inspired by this new. So for me, when I encounter like a new medium of writing, I'm like, I gotta try this. Like, I just have to try this. And so I had already been thinking about doing a play for the last like couple of years, but I just never pulled the trigger on it. But going to see this play from this past week, it pushed me, you know what I'm saying? And so yeah, I'm excited about that. And I feel really inspired to just continue to explore this new medium. So that's what it is for me.
That's super cool. I can attest that it is really awesome to see like how you're exploring the medium too, as somebody who's gotten a little like sneak peek.
Word.
Yeah, I'm all jelly.
Well, thank you, Kara.
You just have to get on my level with Ro, Danny.
I'm here.
You said you don't have the time though.
I totally don't have time. Yeah. maybe like a month when things
There's
like
only
calm
room
down.
for one of us high maintenance people in Danny's life at a time.
Now,
Okay.
we'll figure it out.
Okay, cool. I'll keep my ideas to myself.
I have the tits, so I take precedence.
Word.
I can't do that.
So now I guess we just move on to the interview. We can jump on in. I like to start with hearing Danny, can you tell us, when you meet somebody for the first time and you're introducing yourself, you're pitching yourself, like how do you describe yourself to people?
Hi, I'm Danny. I write comics. I am not good at talking about myself in that way. Like, and there's a log pitch, which we're going to, I guess, elide for today. Kayla's aware of a log of it. It's actually quite long.
It's so impressive, actually.
So many weird things. Turns out my new boss also looked me up elsewhere on the internet. It was like, dude, you are so impressive. And I was like, yeah, I don't lead with that stuff. So I finished grad school in medieval literature in 2013, did a bunch of freelance writing while moving back to Toronto, which is the local hub of civilization in my area. Did some sort of slightly directionful stuff towards film, got totally waylaid by other corporate writing that paid quite well. Then the pandemic happened while I was workshopping and producing my first comic project, which is Sleepwalkers, which is the Kickstarter that's live now, actually. And when the lockdowns hit, I just decided to go like heads down and really work on creative and sort of start building my own brand as a creator. And I have done that. That's how I met Kayla. Yeah. I've published a couple of other books through Kickstarter campaigns since then, like five books,
okay.
5 books, I think, in the last 2 years. So that's quite a lot. And I'm working on my craft as a writer less often than I would like, but still on the regular. And I'm just trying to really work on my breath right now and get a bit of everything like done and coherent, and then sort of figure out where I want to go now. So I'm workshopping. We're kind of close to pre-production on a project with Kayla.
We are, yeah.
I'm workshopping a satanic teen drama project. And now I have this werewolf concept I really like.
Love it.
So that's going on. I finally got new pages for a revision of a really great novel that like only English majors will ever read. One of those books, though it is the first Gothic novel.
Ooh.
So I'm doing a comic version of that. Someone does get murdered by a giant flying helmet on like page 3.
Okay.
In prose.
Coming out hot, like.
So yeah, I'm making a comic out of that book. Heck yeah, I am. That's sort of the thing I've got going on. I need to work on like this Victorian thing. So a lot of my inspiration from the last couple of years has really come from stories I've liked, and with a background in medieval, that's really quite a lot of stories. I can go pretty far back for that. So it was a ton of fun. I just mash it up with other stuff, make it weird. Because if I'm not making it weird, I feel like I'm doing something wrong.
True.
And then make it fun.
Okay. Well, you just knocked out like 3 of my interview questions there. So
ask them anyway.
Let's go through one by one.
Let's rewind.
Must follow the process.
Let's rewind. Tell the story of how you and I started working together in the first place.
Okay.
Oh, I think
so shall I now trying to think of if the process in arm's reach, and it isn't. So I mean, unless you have one.
Oh, I do. Actually, hold on.
Okay. This is amazing television, by the way.
Right.
Thank you, viewers, for sticking with us here.
Live
I will find the alternate prop as well, just to make sure we have this all at hand.
I don't have the comic next to me.
Well,
the comic is like,
got it.
oh, okay. I was gonna say I have
Put
these
this down,
frames
put this down.
in my living room.
You tell the story.
Okay.
No.
Set the scene.
One of my pandemic projects was this book, The Myth Butcher, which is a collection of 3 historical short stories, like James Bond meets the silliest Pokemon you've ever considered. There's like a jungle walrus in there. There's like
Did we lose him?
I don't know. His face is really funny. Oh, there you are.
So yeah, apparently Tentacle Frog just wrecked the stream. So this was like an anthology. I was just writing this stuff as writing practice because I was playing around with historicals, and I found some really cool historical situations from like the imperial 20th century before the First World War, and I just put silly monsters in it and created this character to sort of bring us through these spaces and to meet these creatures with. So I'm going on Kickstarter and I'm like, okay, well, I need some swag and I need it to be like kind of appropriate to the book. And so I find Kayla somehow on the internet, on Facebook.
Yeah, I don't remember how, but
I think you were posting that you were looking for work and I liked your portfolio.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, I want pinups of these monsters. Now, in comics, that usually means like a full page thing, like looking badass, really showcasing the monsters. And then the way Kayla interpreted that was 1940s sexy lady cards, if you will show your prop.
So let's see. This
prop,
is
sexy jungle walrus, sexy Arctic millipede. Sexy tentacle frog. She's Italian.
Yeah.
So this result being A, exactly what I asked for, and B, not at all what I anticipated, made me immediately want to work with her in the future, because despite the fact that my direction was so amazingly awful, that I got these very sexy cards, which we printed in giclée on archival paper.
Yes.
So they will last forever, and the colors will last quite a while, and someone is bound to have an awkward sexual awakening to one of those.
Like, the monster porn industry is booming.
You got my back, Phoebe. Anyways, so yeah, like someone who brings that kind of confusion and joy and surprise to me as a writer, someone who I want to work with. I'm not collaborating with people to stay in my comfort zone. I'm collaborating with people to make better stuff. And it turns out Kayla demonstrated with that she was one such person.
And here we are.
Now we're in pre-production for a very silly fantasy project.
Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so fun. It's gonna be
goblins and knives
really long.
And babies, so many babies.
Rose gonna feel blessed by the end of it. He's gonna be like, I only have 4. This is great.
yeah, so many babies and like giant raccoons and a whole lot of death.
A neon stripper forest.
Neon, yes, we definitely have neon forests and all kinds of. I am just like going nuts. The fantasy is so post-apocalyptic, and it's a magical apocalypse. So I'm just going crazy, and I am writing all kinds of ridiculous poetry that thankfully nobody will have to read but Kayla.
Except for me.
I mean, I don't want to do that job, but she's going to be great at it. Turning that insanity into a picture.
It's true. This is why we work well together.
I'm torturing her so hard, and we both love it.
We do. The masochist in me is just like the perfect match for Danny.
You know, I'm making sure that you are appropriately challenged for this.
Thank you. Thank you. Ro, do you have any questions that you want to intercede there? Or are you just
no, ask your
watching the
question.
show?
I mean, I have said so many questionable things in the last 2 minutes that if you don't have questions, I would suspect you haven't been listening.
No, I have some questions, but I know Kayla has some questions as well. So I want Kayla
He
to go ahead.
answered most of mine. I think the only one, so like I was gonna ask you, like, how did you find comics from your background in both like
actually.
Oh, okay. Because
Yeah.
you have a background in like two sort of like conflicting scenes. Like I know you were like a rave DJ person for a long time.
That is
also have a degree in medieval literature and then comics.
Yeah. So when I was little, when I was in like high school, like when I was little, I was like reading comics. There were still comics on newsstands at the time, so it was something I was buying so often when I had money. It was a whole thing. Got out of that because I had other things to spend money on. Whatever, I was a child. In high school, I really got into like indie comics, so like a lot of the Vertigo stuff. Like I was reading Sandman, coming out in like the second run of trade paperbacks. Stuff like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac by Yonan Vasquez. Lots of stuff like that really got me back into it. So I've always had this like huge appreciation for comics that approach the novel or that do interesting things, or that do non-mainstream things interestingly, because what I like about stories is how they're told, not necessarily what is the plot. The how of a story is what really matters to me. The rave DJ stuff is slightly less relevant, although I will mash all kinds of things up. And then the medieval lit stuff, a lot of it's really mashy uppy anyways. Those stories have gotten mashed up in sometimes in the forms we have them now. I mean, the way a lot of us see, for example, King Arthur stories is based on Tennyson's King Arthur and White's Once and Future King, and not actual historical medieval King Arthur stories, which are different in the how in a way that I think is really fascinating. Medieval lit, I guess, unlike other forms of literature, is also based on physical objects. Some stories only exist in a single manuscript, and the page design, where the capital letters are, if there's art, really does influence how you read it. Whether someone scratched something out and rewrote it, like you can see that on the page. It's a physical thing. The printing press, doesn't show up until the 15th century, really, and so you don't have this uniformity. Like people are translating the stuff even with their own dialect and sometimes missing words or whatever. So you have it. Every copy is kind of unique, which I love. And so knowing that I do like have a sense of design and how the page goes together, knowing that I like how a story is told, when I started working on Sleepwalkers, one of the main things that really made it a comic is my protagonist's transformation from herself into the superhero. The reason this was a comic is because it only works in the way I want it to if I write it on the page flips. People are physically turning a page. So that's when that's happening as often as possible, especially while it remains mystery. I didn't want to see that all on the same page or on the same 2-page spread, because the way the story is told is really affected by that. So that sort of got me doing comics. And then I was like, okay, well, I just do one thing. I'm just that guy, and it'll take forever for this to be in production, like in a format I want it to be done. Like anything worth doing is worth doing seriously. So if I'm making comics, I'm gonna go make some comics. And that led to all this other stuff that I've done in the interim between having this graphic novel project get into production and be in a saleable format, which is now.
Yeah. Which if you are viewing currently and you're wondering where you can find Danny's Kickstarter for his current graphic novel, it is in the video description. There's a link there for you guys to follow, and we'll be posting it on our social media after the show. So make sure you take a look at that. Yeah.
So you got, if I heard you correctly, you got your PhD in medieval literature?
Yeah.
So when you were doing that PhD, did you know that you wanted to be a writer during that time?
Actually, I spent all of school, and I was in school for a really long time. I went as far as you can go, right? I earned a title. I've contributed meaningfully to the science of human knowledge, and I spent the entire time saying I don't want to be a writer when I grow up.
Wow.
Because a lot of people assume when you're studying lit that you want to be a writer when you grow up. I don't want to be a cultural critic. Turns out a really good way to do that is to be a writer when I grow up. And now that I've followed into it, again, I'm taking it seriously. It's not like I wasn't writing, but analysis and criticism is a different beast. So I didn't really come into this thing like, oh no, I want to be creative the whole time. I don't. Just, I'm not bad at it. Like I can make stuff. I'm trying to think of a way to say what I want to say that's inspiring and not banal. It's actually really easy to create something original. The hard part is finishing the project.
Yeah.
Because you, viewer, whoever the heck you are, wherever you are, your life experiences are unique to you, and your perspective is unique to you. And the problems that you deal with and what you care about and the way you care about them and why you care about them, those are all unique to you. So if you interpret any fictional or real event through that lens, you will produce a unique product. The trick is, of course, finishing that product and having it be a thing. It's really easy to start stuff. And then when you're editing and financing it and collaborating with people, if you're doing that, it gets messy. So if you can do a production and finish it, then that's the really hard part. So that's really inspiring and not banal.
No,
I think it was perfect.
I'm inspired. But to follow up on that, one of the things that I like to ask is, do you remember what specifically made you decide? What was the catalyst for your decision?
Oh, this one's easy too.
To actually start creating.
Yeah. So there was this time in like 2018, and I'm not sure if you remember this. There was a whole bunch of Nazis and Klansmen marching on the streets in, what was it, South Carolina?
Oh, yeah, I do remember.
Yeah.
Charlottesville.
Yeah, the Charlottesville thing.
Yeah.
I was just like, resist. No, resist. That was when I was like, I've got a perspective. I have something to say here. Their understanding of multiculturalism is incorrect and racist and problematic. And let's work on dismantling the systems that encourage that sort of attitudes.
Yeah. Kayla, do you have another question?
No, I'm really fascinated. I didn't know that was the moment.
I know it. I'm not as well. But I do know why I'm doing comics. It was that.
So
really interesting.
I wonder, how do you balance? Because at the end of the day, when you make a comic book or you're telling a story, it's entertainment, right? And people not going to their entertainment to be preached at or to get a message, right? So how do you balance that message or that idea that you're trying to communicate with the entertainment piece? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm not in the entertainment business to preach at people. I have opinions. Many of those opinions I'm not going to write down because they're going to make me seem like an asshole. Especially the way I think to myself in my internal monologue, which has its own quirks that Kayla is quite aware of, that you are probably only getting a sense of now. So I read this piece of criticism about Dickens that he always tries to find sympathy for the little guy and punch up, like wherever possible, right? Like he often attacks structures of power just by pointing out how they operate on those who don't have power. if I'm working on a project where that's an element of it, that's the direction I often take. And that's the way I have always responded to punditry of any kind, right? Like from when I was little, I was like, I would, listen to whatever terribly conservative radio talking smack about Dungeons and Dragons and whatever, and be like, yeah, okay, but what if it's not? Because that seems really silly. And like, from that to people's excuses to tear down social programs, like, yeah, but who's going to help those people? So
right.
I consider that stuff. And then often there's a story there, and sometimes it's a story I want to tell. The Myth Butcher doesn't have any of that. It's an imperialist just being destroyed by the colonies in a really weird way. But that's not the point of the book at all. It's, wow, this is just some cool stuff in history that got buried because we had 2 world wars.
Yeah.
My horror anthologies aren't really about that. I wrote a story about the rats in your house just learning education and starting an army and deciding to kill you and take over the neighborhood. Like, that's not sophisticated. I mean, I have a science fiction project featuring a giant robot that punches spaceships. The gimmick for which is largely there's a giant robot that punches spaceships. I mean, it's a little bit like, there's another impetus for that I don't think comes across in the finals, but it was there and it was why I wrote it. And that's vaguely political. I mean, okay, it's specifically political, but I'm not going to know until I've done the project if it comes through in a way that I care about. So no matter what sort of story you're telling, like, you're still following the perspective of your protagonist. Like, that's in prose, that's the person whose thoughts you're privy to, usually. Right? In a play, that's the person who's most often going to be narrating themselves to the audience and talking about their thoughts and soliloquizing. In a film, that's the person, the camera is looking at them and their reaction to the world around them constantly. And in comics, it's over their shoulder where you're seeing everything. It's their transformation. I mean, in any narrative, really, it's their transformation that the audience is going to most likely sympathize with. So it's not about a story about like why you should resist the system. Like Sleepwalkers, which is probably the most political of these, is a story about like, no, actually, non-white people kind of have it rough, and the way they imagine themselves is not the same as people who participate in the majority culture. And that's the entire point, is the imagination of the self is different. Here is a story in which that is the case. And then the rest of the consequences are purposefully incidental. The rest of the plot stuff that might be like a statement about what's acceptable to have in art that some people wrongly think is inappropriate in, for example, comics. It's there, but it's all incidental. It's not a book about that. It's a book about looking at yourself as a part of society and then wondering why you don't fit in. And that applies to a lot of people, no matter what their background is, possibly including those Nazis and Klansmen and their sympathizers who were marching in Charlottesville, etc. So, they see a lot of things wrong with their society and how they may or may not fit in. But as it turns out, I think everyone does, because people fundamentally are people and do people-y things.
Do people-y things.
Yeah. Sorry, the version of that I'm used to is medieval people aren't stupid. They're just as much people as we are, and they're just as rational as we are. So, like, listen, don't say they're backwards. That different way of looking at the world. You are possibly judging. Hey, let's go read some of the stuff they actually wrote about themselves.
Right.
Right. Because listening to people talk about themselves, generally they are as sophisticated as any other people who talk about themselves. Mm-hmm. So just sort of showing that there's this level of internality and sophistication from someone, she's got like a bachelor's in philosophy, so someone who's reasonably trained and able to articulate how they view the world and what they're concerned about in the world, even though it's not really a book about that, it's just a personal struggle. That's sort of how the graphic novel explores. I mean, the stuff it very obviously adulting sucks.
Word.
Ro, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, go, Kayla, go.
Or build off of that. I know we're getting to our time, so I just
kind
of
wanted. You have so little time. I'm sorry. I'm so long-winded.
No,
that was very much a lecture.
No, it's perfect. No, it's really interesting. I really like it's funny because as somebody who's worked with you for quite a while now, I was aware of some of that, but I don't think we had ever sat down and you had like articulated that completely to me.
No,
you
I
know,
don't
so
think we had done.
yeah, it's funny the way that can kind of be like revealed through this interview process. I think that's really like interesting to me.
Yeah. You there, Danny? Can you hear me?
I'm here.
Okay, bet. So we coming up on the time. I guess the last question. I really have a lot of other questions that I want to ask.
I know.
But the last question that I would ask,
like, edit this, do a second.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. We might have to do a part 2.
You can keep me on after if you just want to chat. I'd love to.
Yeah.
But what I do want to ask, I love asking this question. And I think this could be really interesting just coming from you and your background. What is it that you would tell your younger self? Like as a young creator, if you could go back and talk to your younger creator self, like what would you say to yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
I'd probably tell myself to like constantly have my own creative going on. I'm sure if I was writing a whole lot of crap for the last like 20 years, I'd be much better at it now.
Yeah.
And so I've often had my own projects on the go, but a little bit of this, go off to something else, a little bit of that, go off to something else, and doing a little bit of creative constantly would have been easy. And I was doing some reasonably creative often, but if I really kept that up even just a little bit, I think I don't know, maybe I'd be better at stuff I'm doing. Maybe I would think my crap was acceptable, but it's a good habit at any rate, is to think about creating stuff and whether that might actually be a way for one to leave an impact on the world.
And that's it right there. I mean, I think like one of the things that I think about is how much time we lose. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes if you find what you want to do late, it's never too late to find what you want to do. But sometimes you look back and you say, oh, I wish I had started earlier, because then maybe I would be a little further in the journey. You know?
Certainly I don't know if I wish I started earlier. I've done a lot of cool stuff that we haven't discussed.
Right.
But you've also only got so much of your life that you can spend on yourself. And doing that, like if you don't find yourself valuable enough to invest time in, why should anybody else?
Yeah, for sure. So real quick, can you, we touched on Sleepwalkers a little bit, but can you just give like a little pitch for it and just let everybody know where they can find you and just plug whatever you want to plug?
So Sleepwalkers is a graphic novel about alienation and the imagination. I'm just going to read some marketing copy off of my Kickstarter campaign.
Perfect.
I suspect because I am slightly exhausted. Not that it's your fault, just that it's been a long day. I woke up real early today. So here's the plot pitch. Degree in hand, Faith Richmond's big dreams soon meet the reality that wanting to change the world doesn't mean you actually can. Struggling to find work as she watches her friends get ahead, it feels like her dreams have become nightmares. What she doesn't know is that she is making a difference. While she sleeps, her subconscious takes over, becomes a real superhero, making the world better in ways she never imagined. Convinced her life won't fail to start forever, Faith decides the only way to deal with the struggle is to push through it, risking her dignity and her future in the process. And that's when the real nightmares begin. Dun, dun, dun. But really, it's a social drama with some superheroes and some crazy monsters, because not everyone wants to affect the world in the same way.
Word. Awesome. So the link, we have the link in the description of the video, so you could definitely go to that Kickstarter, support it. I read about 80 pages before we got on here, and
nice one.
It was great. So
really get to the end.
I definitely encourage everybody to go check it out, support. It funded, right? It funded yesterday.
It funded, yeah. So we're good now. We're just trying to sell copies of the book. So the book's done. It will be. I spoke with my printer about this. We will be able to ship for Christmas in North America.
Nice.
So that it'll be available for that. Also, because this is sort of part of a small series of graphic novels. It's 12 chapters in total. This is 1 through 4. Issue 5 is also done. That's not on the Kickstarter. We're currently drawing issue 6. So hopefully knowing at least issue 5 is done will give all of these strangers who are hopefully listening to you a little bit of confidence that, okay, this is a man who at least is able to finish more of the project and not leave anyone in the lurch.
For sure. For sure. Well, definitely go check out that project. Congratulations, Danny. Thank you so much for coming on the show, spending some time with us. Kayla, do you have anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I think that was great. Other than I'm psyched. Let's set up round 2. I have tons of more questions to ask now that I've got a sneak peek into your secret life. And I'm sure Ro has a long list. Yeah.
Sure. So you can have your people talk to my people.
Word.
Yeah. And we'll figure it out. I'm happy to be here. You guys are great.
Awesome.
I've really admired your work that I've seen so far. So I'm glad I finally gotten this chance to meet you. I already know you, Kayla. You're great.
I know.
And so humble.
Very, very humble.
Well, again, thanks, Danny, for coming on. I'm definitely excited to see what you do next, man. And to the viewers, thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. If you enjoyed this, if you like this, subscribe, share it, tell somebody about us. And with that, we love you. We out of here.